We are recording. Welcome. Uh, this is weird because it feels like we're doing something very, very official, but it's just us talking,
Yeah.
right? And I've been wanting to do this for a longer time because there are so many subjects that we can talk about, that we kind of have an idea about, and that I think are really valuable for people to learn about and to understand and to maybe expand their awareness of everything that they're uh, living right now and everything that surrounds them. And so, yeah, welcome to my show.
Thanks.
Episode 1
Episode 1
of the Holistic Smalltalk.
I love first annuals.
First annual. So, I've been really wanting to do this for a long time. Starting a podcast, talking about all these different subjects that go through from the most basic things of our lives to
The sun.
to the sun and to the cosmos and to consciousness and spirituality, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm super glad that you accepted my invitation. I mean, it's not very challenging to say, yeah,
So much pressure.
I don't want to have this conversation. We're always having these conversations.
Yeah.
So this is my buddy, Joel Sizemore, or
everybody.
Joel Asher.
Yeah, as I'm known online.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're known online as Joel Asher.
Yeah.
You're an artist. You're specialized in biodynamics. You were military to a certain extent, but also rescue swimmer. The badass guys that jump off helicopters into the water to save people's lives. And right now I'm noticing that I'm not having a microphone on me. I hope you guys forgive me. I hope the sound is good anyways. We've been exchanging a lot of ideas that are connected to life and becoming free and being self-sufficient and caring for ourselves and the families and consciousness. So, yeah, welcome, Joel. Is there anything you want to say?
Oh yeah, I'm happy to be your first podcast, your first interview or conversation, really. Yeah, I mean, a little history of myself. I sprouted in Seattle, Washington. That's where I arrived, but grew up in the mountains of Oregon, just east of Portland, where the hills become plains. And from a young age, my mom would make a backpack for me, fill it with food and water, and be like, "Be back by dark." And off I'd go. So I spent a lot of time in nature alone, running around the hills. So that was nice. At an early age, I found that I had a pretty good ability to handle crazy situations with a calm mind. So at 14, I became a cadet volunteer firefighter EMT. So I was riding along in ambulances at 14, 15 years old, watching people like overdosing on shit. And I was just like, okay, what do I need? What do I need to do? So I took that with me when I joined the military. I wanted to go in to become a firefighter, and when I passed all the tests and everything, they were like, oh, well, you can do anything you want. So let's get him from going to firefighting into more technical jobs. So I became a aviation aircrew rescue swimmer. The specialty.
Aviation aircrew swimmer.
Yeah.
It's like air and water, everything at the same time. Right?
Yeah. It was above, below, water.
What age was that?
That was basically 19 to 29, 10 years. It was great, I loved the job of flying in helicopters. Got about 2,000 hours in Sikorsky SH-60s, which is like the Army Black Hawk, but it's gray, navy blue. And spent a lot of time operating areas. 99 to 2004, I was deployable. So I was in Pakistan, November 2001, very beginning of things. Started opening my eyes to things that were going on over there, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to find my exit point soon. Forced vaccinations, of course, which, of course, pissed me off.
Yeah.
But overall, the military was a good experience in the sense of teaching me organizational capacity and strategic planning and tactical implementation, SOPs, standard operating procedures. So basically creating knowledge that's passed downable. So if you leave a farm, for example, because I've taken all this and moved to from the destructive nature to the
Constructive.
constructive nature.
Regenerative.
Yeah, with that systems thinking frame of mind to how to strategically, plan and implement the plan. The 10 years there, it was good. It was good overall. I survived it.
You have that ability of saying that things are good when probably other people would have said it was horrible.
It could have been worse. It could have been worse. I have family members that I have one specific family member that was in the Marines for 25 years plus. I think it was 28 years. He has some stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. But but taking the how I was trained, how to think, how to approach multidimensional warfare, because trained in anti-submarine warfare in a helicopter, you have below the water, at the water, and above the water threats, essentially, that you're trying to coordinate assets to prevent attacks, to implement attacks, all sorts of things. So I kind of adapted that systems thinking mind rather quickly to play around. It's like multidimensional chess.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you to talk a little bit about multidimensional warfare.
Mm. Well, just understanding the limits and capacities of threats or any system, right? So, multidimensional warfare in the sense of the military, especially in anti-submarine warfare, was understanding the water conditions. So, oceanography, understanding where the sound layer is, where sound gets trapped in the ocean will travel so far. So, the submarines, they're the best ones in understanding where the sound layer is, how far their sounds will be carried, So, it was quite fun. I got to hunt a Seawolf class submarine and got quick kill awards in all training exercises. And they were like, damn, you're one of the best ASW helicopter guys we have. And I'm like, that's cool, but I'm getting out. I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah. So it took you 10 years to leaving the military and to find a better path.
Well, what happened was 2003 when, I don't know if you remember 2002 when the anthrax letters were mailed out in Washington and they went to 4 offices and some people died, supposedly. It could have happened. Didn't confirm it, don't know the people. But after this incident, they basically said, we need to vaccinate all troops with anthrax vaccines. And even though it was not considered a safe and, reliable and effective injection, I don't like to use the word vaccine because vaccination implies something different than.
Yeah, there's a definition for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They wanted to they tried to change that during COVID.
Yeah. So in 2003, they made it mandatory that all deployable service members had to have nearly 7 shots of anthrax, and they would rotate shoulders, right? And it just completely messed me up. Digestion, concentration ability, nervous system. I felt stressed. I was just like, I'm not normally aggressive and bugged out like this. I was pissed.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, hey, I don't want to take this. And they go, well, you can say no. And then what we'll do is we'll just pull your aviation wings and we'll put you in a paperwork position and make your life miserable for the last 5 years until you get out. Because I had just re-enlisted the year before for 5 years. And so I was like, oh man, that's how you guys are going to treat me? I was like, okay, all right, load me up. So I have friends that actually, Anne, a really good friend of mine, she was a rescue swimmer too. She's badass. I mean, to be a female rescue swimmer, you gotta pull your own. There's no.
Yeah.
There's no letbacks.
It's not like today where you're just a weakling and you come through or you go through DEI and you're accepted, even though you're weaker. So it was still based on meritocracy.
Oh yeah.
Right, on merit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had to do the push-ups, had to do the sit-ups, had to do the swims.
Yeah, and
there's no like, oh, you're female? Okay, well then you can take longer and move slower.
Yeah.
Like, no, you got to pull your own weight. So, Aviation Rescue Swimmer School, I believe, to my knowledge, is the third most physically and mentally challenging school that the Navy has to offer, just below SEALs and EOD. EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. Yeah.
Say that again.
Divers.
Okay.
EOD, diver.
Yeah. You probably have to go through a lot of stuff underwater that involves you almost like drowning. Right?
Yeah.
Like
in some cases
underwater.
they actually drown you and bring you back. Just so you know what it's like to drown.
Shit.
And not everybody comes back, but all souls have their time here, I guess.
Well, and so you were talking about your badass friend.
And so basically, she refused the injections. They pulled her wings. She stopped flying. She got out when her initial 5-year contract was up. The reason it's an initial 5-year contract when you join, because normally it's 2 to 3 years initial contract for military. But because of the technical training, and I mean, literally it was 2.5 years of straight training before you're fleet ready, operational ready. And even then it's another year until you're qualified as like, you can train somebody else. So it's 3.5 to almost 4 years of training that they put into each rescue swimmer in this sense, before you're fully operational. So they want to get at least 1.5 to 2 years of active use and training out of everybody. So her contract was up. She got out. She got out with a, I believe it was either dishonorable or other than honorable discharge, which affects a lot of federal grants, loans, multitude of things. You know, jobs, right? Clearances, because we have, maintain secret clearances. And so many years later, I think it was, I'd have to ask her, 4 or 5 years later, she had to fight for basically reverting her discharge back to honorable, and they finally did that. Just like now with the COVID injections, right? They forced those on the military personnel, and there were military personnel that said, no, we're not going to take it. They got discharged, and now the military's coming back, and they're like, okay, well, we'll reinstate you with rank and pay.
Yeah, and actually with full repay of the time that they lost. That just so you guys know, we just listened into the Trump inauguration, and he actually mentioned exactly that. So this not only, this is a situation that is basically repeating, right? They did this with you guys. Supposedly the military people, many people might not like them. I have regained a lot more respect to everybody that goes through military, because your initial cause is to protect the country, whatever the country is, and they treat most military like shit now. Like
and to learn how to work together,
the anthrax and so on and so forth. Say it again.
They learn, that's I think one of the best aspects of military training is learning how to work as a team. In diverse conditions, because I worked with people from all over the country. Right? So
and then sometimes with other countries probably as well, right?
Oh when you're in the aviation world, I mean, we worked with the Germans, the Egyptians, the Swedes, a lot of Brits. Yeah.
And the Brits are just as badass, I think, as the Americans.
Oh yeah, SAS.
Yeah.
Those guys are crazy.
So she got reinstated as honorable.
Which allowed her to get her GI Bill benefits, which essentially pays for college.
Yeah.
But they withheld that from her until it changed to honorable discharge.
Yeah.
So that's the power that they have. A lot of people don't realize that when they sign the contract with the government, that their physical body then becomes property of the U.S. government.
Yeah.
So then, if you intentionally hurt yourself to get out of training, to get out of war, right? This has happened before, and they're like, we got to create something about this. There are people that would cut off fingers, to not go to war, or like intentionally lose a hand, to not go to Vietnam or wars, and so by identifying your physical body as government property, you can be charged with damaging government property.
Wow. So basically, the Constitution that supposedly you're protecting, you're not part of it. You're not included within the Constitution, right?
Waiver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. So freedom of choice, forget it, right? Probably freedom of speech, forget that one too, right?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's a catch-22. I think the military is good because for emergency situations, natural disasters, which we're probably going to get to a little bit, are going to become more and more frequent with the weakening magnetic field of the planet.
Yeah.
So, yeah, military or the National Guard. I mean, they have the National Guard, but I mean, the strength of the military to show up in emergency situations is unmatched for, organization and manpower.
Wow. So, so you went out of military. Was that before or after your university degree?
So I left the military 2007. I think it was January. January 2007. I exited, moved to Oregon. And then I was like, okay, I want to reorient and figure out some things. So I took a couple years to explore. I went to Peru, had some ayahuasca ceremonies. That really helped unravel a lot of the programming. It was like a huge data dump and like a rewrite.
Mm-hmm.
My character's always been gentle and kind, but the military really reprogrammed me. The people you work with, right? They're always on edge. They're like, when 9/11 happened, some of them were like, yeah, now we get to start flying with guns and like we're going to war. And I'm like, what's wrong with you guys? I was like, come on, So,
so
yeah,
probably
the people affected me.
Yeah. So you're probably surrounded by a lot of people that have a lot of challenges with anger management, and the only thing they're waiting for is to kick some ass, right?
Yeah, I work.
They're very much on the edge, and just regulate this here real quick. Very much on the edge and just ready for a fight or whatever.
Yeah, I worked with a couple guys that had been literally gone through boot camp, all their training, anti-submarine warfare school, aviation school, in the squadron for years. I mean, they'd known each other for like 4 years, right? It got so intense on our second deployment from 2001 to 2002. We spent 159 days straight at sea on the USS Roosevelt aircraft carrier. 159 days.
So that's 4 months?
Yeah, 4 months and
4.5.
Oh, 5 months. 5 months and a couple days straight, meaning at sea, not pulling into a single port. So no days off. Every 45 days.
But on sea, on a submarine?
No, on an aircraft carrier.
Okay.
Yeah. So the helicopter squadron I was based on had around 6 helicopters, right? And there were at least 3 to 4 that were always up and running with a couple of backups, right? If you needed parts, if one broke down. So on the USS Roosevelt aircraft carrier, nuclear powered,
Crazy.
159 days straight at sea, right? Longest in the modern U.S. naval history for a ship not pulling into a port. So basically, to get resupply, we'd pull up alongside of a replenishment ship. And I do remember participating in, so what would happen is the helicopters would be dropping things, right? So there would be giant pallets. We'd come down, hook up, drop them, right? And there's people clearing them off the deck, and then there's lines of people like leaf cutter ants, right? Just passing food,
Wow.
right? And I remember one time I was on the food passing section, and I'm like looking and I'm reading these boxes that's coming in, and they're cold, you know. I'm like, grade D meat for military and prison consumption only. And I'm like, oh, interesting. So here they're serving us like the lowest quality, highest quantity food, right? But anyway, so on this deployment, this is also the time where we had a couple weeks where it was divided up. We went inside Pakistan. So we were providing air recovery support for the southeast part of Afghanistan as they started coming in and just annihilating things. So these two guys I worked with, this one guy, he loved to pull out his knife and be like, yeah, I'm going to stab you. And the other guy was just like, well, stab me then. And he just went like, and he was like, you stabbed me. So, I mean, it was just really crazy, you know, it gets intense, you know, even people who know each other work together for years, you know, they just like, the aggression builds up and, you know, nobody's having sex or they're having sex but nobody knows, you know, and yeah, so it was interesting to see that.
Yeah, they mess with your brain and with your emotions and with your psyche a lot, right? In training.
Oh,
You had this story that you told me about you being a prisoner.
Oh, SEER school.
Yeah.
Survive.
How
evade,
was that?
resist,
How
and
did
escape.
you guys get in there? Like how does this happen? Like you're going into a training now. You will be prisoner, and then we will beat the shit out of you, and we will treat you in a really messed up way.
Oh yeah.
How did that happen? Can you tell me?
So everybody, so the Navy. Oh, look, beautiful toucan. Tucano, yeah, and one of the trees over there, tallest one. Just one though. Strange. So toucans. So everybody who is at high risk of becoming a prisoner of war is required to go through SEER school.
Say that again?
Anybody who...
No, the school.
SEER, S-E-R-E. Acronyms, the military's full of them.
SEER is?
SEER, survive, evade, resist, and escape.
So,
S-E-R-E.
S-E-R-E, yeah.
So it's a requirement if you're aviation, if you're a pilot, if you're a Navy SEAL, anybody who risks getting deployed in high threat areas, you got to go through this training.
So basically, you carry around a certain amount of information with you that is, so to speak, classified or could be used against you guys.
Exactly.
Right. And if they capture you, you don't want to be the one giving off this information.
I know where everything is.
Yeah, exactly.
Please don't pull my toenails. Yeah. So it was a fun school. It was probably one of my favorite schools I've ever been to. Because there were kids, kids. There were people that grew up in cities, right? They had no forest experience. Maybe some camping here and there, but nobody out running around with map and compass trying to navigate and figure out what to eat on the ground, and so it was a lot of fun. They dropped us off. We were out there for 6 days, 5 nights, something like that. First couple nights, and this is cold. This is in like Southern California in March.
Southern California in March.
Yeah, in the mountain hills,
spring
area,
and
cool nights.
Exactly, very cool nights. No.
Yeah.
Probably frost. No.
I can't remember if there was frost. I don't think it got frosty, but
because it's kind of desert kind of vibe.
But
right?
I mean, you don't have a blanket. You just have your flight suit and boots and water. And, you're running around. But anyways, I was paired up. First couple days, they're showing you how to make traps with animals.
So
rabbits.
survival skills.
Yeah, survival stuff, starting fires. I'm like,
filter water, no?
Collecting water, desert area, using a tarp to concentrate the water, dig the hole, that type of stuff. Although in an emergency situation, I would have no problem with drinking my own urine, even though they say, oh, you shouldn't drink your own urine. The key to urine drinking is that you don't drink the beginning or the end.
You only drink the middle.
Midstream.
Only drink the middle, guys.
Midstream's the way to go. So so then after a couple days, then the bad guys show up and they start chasing you around at night, right, with lights and so at this point you're in a group of like 6 people and they start chasing you, and I'll never forget the first night that they started chasing us, because in the desert area they have these cacti, right, cholla, right, that if you find them in the ground and they're dehydrated, they have like this beautiful structure of it's almost like coral, but like with holes. Anyways, so nighttime, running away from the bad guys, I'm like, oh, there's a bush, I'm gonna jump in it, and I jump in, and it's a giant fucking cholla bush, and I'm like, and I just stop. I'm like, oh fuck, you know, and so I'm sitting there and I'm not moving, and the bad guys are actually, you know, they're military personnel, so they're out there with their flashlights, and I could, I see the flashlight come, and it's like, and then it comes back to me. I know they saw me, and they just left me. They're like, let's just leave this idiot, but because I was literally stuck in the cactus and I couldn't move. So that kind of hurt for a bit.
Probably thought, poor guy.
Yeah, they're like, he's had enough punishment.
You jumped into the cactus.
He's not gonna forget the cholla. So eventually, you know, you break up from your teams of 6 or 8, and you get paired up with people. So I got paired up with this Marine, and like, they literally have guns with blanks, and they come in and they're shooting, and the guy comes, he's like, okay, here's your nav point. You got to make it to here. If you make it to a nav point, you get like. It was like a food drop.
So nav point is navigational point or something?
Yeah. So they kind of had boundary lines, but we didn't really respect them because we were just like, well, we're here to survive, right? And we'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, we can't go into this other country and come back. Like, no, if you're survival mode, you just do whatever it takes. So I got paired up with this guy, and most of the people, like I said, were like city people. And so I got paired up with him, and he was like, hey, what's your name? I'm like, Joel. He's like, what's yours? I'm like, or he's like, Paul, or something like that. And I was like, where'd you grow up? He goes, backwoods, Pennsylvania. What about you? I'm like, backwoods, Oregon. We're like, yes. So we took off. We were the last 2 to get caught, right? But literally, they catch you and they beat you, and you know, and then they take you to a camp for a couple nights, and they put you in a little tiny cell where, you know, they give you a coffee can with a plastic bag to poop, shit, and piss in. And then you have to empty out the bag. And I think I was the only one there that pooped because I was eating grubs and ants and all these things. And like these little wild potatoes.
Oh my God.
When I was being chased during the day, I'd stop and like, oh, a stump. I'd load my pockets up with grubs and little potatoes I'd grab along the way. And then when I could stop and everything was chill, I'm like, meat and potatoes. So, yeah, I had a good poop. But yeah, it was a pretty intense training. They beat us, asked for information. I accidentally got thrown against a cement wall instead of a wall with a spring and plywood. This guy who was taller than me with a gap between his teeth like this big, he like picked me up. He was like, you see this wall? I will throw you against this wall. And I'm like, I'm so tired. I'm like, dude, I don't know how many people were on the flight. He's like, you think I'm joking? And he went to throw me, and he tripped over my foot and fell into me. My head went whack and hit the back of the cement wall, which was not supposed to happen. And he dropped me, and he was like, the last thing I remember him saying was like, oh, fuck. And then the medic came in. She's like, are you okay? It was kind of nice. They left me alone for the rest of the night, besides putting me into a box and standing on the lid to close it with like little holes like this big for breathing. So you're like in this little ball and you can't move, and you're in there for like an hour.
Damn.
That's when I found out I was just a little bit claustrophobic. Yeah.
Wow, so I think like for most people this would be really traumatizing.
Yeah, not everybody makes it. You know, that's why, you know, interview is nothing close to interrogation.
Yeah. Say that again. So nothing.
An interview, nothing like being interrogated.
Yeah. So
This is fun. This is
yeah.
nice. Yeah.
So interrogation is really hardcore, or?
Yeah, it can be,
Mm-hmm.
depending on who you're asking, right? What do you want to know?
Yeah, but like if you going through training, they're kind of simulate it, but not really. But
Yeah, they keep you up all night. Your mind is, you know, mind fucked.
mm-hmm.
I mean, they play music and gunshots and babies crying all night long. You can't sleep.
Well, yeah.
Couple days of that, and you're like, man, where the fuck am I?
Yeah, this kind of reminds me a little bit of that movie, The Man Who Stared at Goats. You remember that movie?
Yeah.
It's super funny. Where you know they do the whole thing with acid and really mess with people's minds and
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, taking that forward, I waited 4 years before I used my GI Bill for college.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Got out in 2007. Went around, looked at all these different schools. I looked at the University of Oregon in Eugene.
Yeah.
Beautiful campus, all the grass cut nice and neat, hedges. Walked the campus for a while, had an appointment with the counselor. Came in and sat down, and she was like, oh, what do you think of the campus? I was like, oh, it's beautiful. I just want to see what programs you have to offer. You know, I was at this point. So my older brother, James, Jimmy, I called him my entire life. He was a huge inspiration to me. When I was in my 20s, he would come and visit me wherever I was, you know, living in Florida, and he'd be like, man, don't eat McDonald's. If you want to win a woman's heart, learn how to make a good fucking salad, you know, do fasting, cleansing, you know, he was just like, and then he came and he was like, permaculture, that's where it's at, you know,
I
that's the
remember
way,
you telling me that.
bioconstruction, you know, bioconstruction, this is the
Natural
future.
building.
He's like, getting off grid, not being dependent on the system, because like system's going to be fucked someday, you know, and also it's just, you know, overall more healthy lifestyle. I think you could agree.
Yeah.
To know that like you have the capacity to support yourself and your family if the lights go out, like
When
you can't
shit
buy
hits the
anything.
fan.
Yeah, and the shit is getting closer to the fan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's moving in slow motion.
it is. It's like an
Very
asteroid tumbling through space. It's like, oh look, there's a giant fan. So I went to Eugene, went to University of Oregon, sat down. She was like, oh yeah, so if you're coming here as a new student, you'll probably have some credits that transfer from the Navy. But here is a list of the required classes that all new students need to take. And I looked at the list. There was like six things. And I, without really getting much into detail, I like slid the list back and I was like, thank you very much. Have a nice day. And I got up and she's like, well, don't you want to hear about our other programs? I'm like, I'm not going to come to the school and waste my time with programs that I have no interest in. I had enough of that in the military, right? I went in, they were like, you have to take these courses, you have to do these qualifications.
So can you give me an example of what some of those were?
Oh, I don't remember at the time.
No?
They did not spark any interest in me.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like...
Nothing to do with like sustainability, agriculture. It was, I believe it was more of like economics of school, some type of like preparation training for what to do with your degree, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So that was Oregon State University.
Of Oregon.
Yeah.
Oregon Ducks.
And then?
So I was like, oh, okay. So and then talked to a friend of mine who's like, hey, you know what? Have you ever heard of the Evergreen State College in Olympia? And I was like, no. He was like, you should check it out. I think you might like that. So I went up to Olympia, Washington, and went and checked out the campus, surrounded by trees in the middle of the forest.
Which is not very far away from where you were already.
Yeah,
right?
from Portland. Portland was kind of like my home base. Portland, the Dallas, where I grew up. And so I went there to this campus, and I was just like, I fell in love immediately. I was just like, oh no prerequisites. You can write your own ticket. You know, they're big on sciences. They have in agriculture, sustainable agriculture. And so my first course at Evergreen was basically about healing the mind and the body, right?
Which is the perfect thing that you needed right after
Yeah.
military, right?
Yeah, I mean, this was 4 years later, and I had gone through my ayahuasca ceremonies and also participated in several mushroom journeys, which I think is very medicinal and helpful. So yeah, I was already kind of like, okay, you know, shed a lot of the baggage that I was carrying for a bit.
Yeah.
So
What I would add to that is, you know, you've done ayahuasca, and many people think that after ayahuasca they're kind of enlightened, but then you actually have to do the work here with yourself and really getting in contact with yourself without the help of a substance, right? Like the substance doesn't substitute the work that we need to do with ourselves and also on a physical level, right? And I think that's one of the things that the school probably might have provided to you.
yeah,
Continue on.
yeah, absolutely. It gives you the tools, but then you have to build the frame, and you have to fill in the frame and insulate. You know, using a house as a metaphor. You know, here's your tools. Now go to work.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, jumping into this place, and then I went into dreams class. Right, I had 6 months of dreams as metaphors. Right, which was one of my favorite classes.
Yeah.
And during that second course, so I found out that. So my last 3 years, jumping back a little bit, my last 3 years in the military, I was an instructor. So I was an instructor in San Diego where students who had just come from rescue swimmer school, anti-submarine warfare system operators school, then they start flying in helicopters for the first time. So I was an instructor in this place, right? And you spend a year with students, right? Flying in the pool,
Many of them
classroom.
kids, actually.
Kids, yeah. Like you're talking like 19, 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
And here I am, you know, I'm only like 25, but still, like, you know, they're 20s. Sometimes
I feel
age,
like
you
now with 25 I was a kid.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. I mean, we got to experience that kiddiness, that
Yeah.
never gonna die phase.
Yeah.
You know, never gonna get older or weaker phase. You know, that's important. And so I was training all these students, right? So I learned about curriculum design. Because they sent me through this program, Master Training Specialist, another signature qualification. So at Evergreen, I was able to design my own curriculum and find a teacher to sponsor me. And so if you can do that, then you can go anywhere you want and you can get credits. So I actually ended up going and having a lucid dream, which gave me a download of information. Meditating in a lucid dream. Do it. See if you can. It'll change your world.
Yeah, I have zero control over my dreams.
Well, that's a practice, you know. One of my favorite books, I think I talked to you about it. This one here, actually. The Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep. Great book.
Let me just...
Great book.
Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're actually in his library. And your office that he was so kind to offer to us. We're staying in his place for a month. It's almost coming to its end. We still wanted to pull this one off.
Yeah.
That's why we have this big collection with
almost organized.
My Seal and Running by Paul Stamets, the 2 permaculture books, Form, Life, and Consciousness. So many different books here that I think almost everybody should learn. This is actually the stuff I believe we should learn in school rather than, you know, just the basic stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Reductionism, mechanistic thinking.
Yeah, I like reductionism actually because it's what I mentioned yesterday when I talked about holistic management, right? Yeah, it's exactly the separation of the whole, right? It's just looking into one little thing and disconsidering the rest of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, this whole thing of your university background and how you create your own curriculum, that was for me actually the thing that I felt like, what? Like you built your own curriculum.
Yeah.
On the other hand, and let me still add this one to it. I think it's gone a little bit overboard now with the whole LGBTQ ideology, because this approach is a little bit. People would probably call this approach a little bit leftist, right? Now I've kind of learned about this kind of spectrum. I consider myself a little bit to the right. Maybe I was a little bit more to the left back in the day, right? And this was a little bit more left approach, but now it's going overboard. Extreme. So you have, what is it, gender studies and all that stuff that isn't really going anywhere, right?
Well, it's going somewhere, but just back to its own tail.
Yeah, and I think that these are actually, let me just close this a little bit. Oh, the cows are there. It's still kind of boggled me, or how to say, I was perplexed about what you did this in university.
Yeah, so I was able to write my own program. I spent a year on the Hawaiian Islands, 4 different islands, studying sustainable communities in the tropics. You know, from like construction to volunteers to education, community, sustainability, you know, the challenges, right? And the number one challenge that was the common thing of everybody is basically they said no community can be isolated and survive. Right? You have to have a connection with another community, another part of the world. You have to have trade, commerce, right? Otherwise, you go down into the ground.
Yeah.
Right. So that to me, I was just like, oh yeah. I mean, I never really thought about that as a survivability. You have to have a sense of energetic trade with other people. You know, it's very, very few humans that I've ever heard of that go off in the mountains and live alone their whole life and survive.
Yeah. Other than the yogis or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like,
but I mean, the percentage of the human population.
But I think the gift of kind of enlightenment, or whatever you might want to call it, is to come back and then share it, right?
Yeah.
I think that movie that I didn't like at all, what was it called? Into the Wild, of that guy that went into the mountains and then he ended up poisoning himself with this plant that he shouldn't have eaten, and he I was almost going to say misgendered. He misidentified the plant.
It was a transplant.
It was a transplant. This is our new joke, the transplant. He misidentified the plant, and then he basically starved to death. And one of the last things that I think he's written in his notebook was that happiness is only real when it can be shared.
Yeah.
And he didn't have it. He didn't know or didn't have the ability to share the happiness that he had lived until his death. So, yeah.
So at the end of this, jumping through my college time, right? I came to Brazil for 6 months, met with Ernst Gosch, did natural building on the beach in Rio, in the state of Rio de Janeiro.
Ernst Gosch is the guy that invented, I do like this because I'm a permaculture designer.
Yeah, he framed
the syntropic agroforestry system.
Yeah, so I went and got to stay with him for a bit on his land and work with him, and we had some good talks. In a short period of time, I learned a lot from him, just from...
What year was this?
2013.
2013. This was probably before he actually took off, right?
Yeah, he was already here in Brazil. He was known.
Yeah.
Right? He's been known, 2007, 2006, for doing what he did, because he literally transformed 500 hectares of barren land with islands of native trees, right? No water running on it. There were cattle. It was clear-cut cattle, right? Cattle definitely helped. But he went in, he bought this land in the 80s, and within 30 years, full canopy forests, water running back through everywhere, protected, soil transformed.
Yeah.
You know, so he had a following here in Brazil for quite a while. But it was interesting, when I visited him in 2013, I met his daughter, who lived just down the road from him. And I had a good talk with her, and she was just like, you know, my father, he has so much potential, but he doesn't want to be, you know, he doesn't want to get it out there. And so, like, I actually had a talk with him, and I was like, Ernst, man, come on, you got to find a way to be comfortable with technology and start sharing what you have, because people need it. It needs to, like, spread, right? And so after I left that, I think is when it started changing, you know. So it was really sweet to have that juncture, to be there for that juncture, and possibly have a beneficial influence on his approach to technology.
Yeah. Nice.
I remember.
Ernst.
Yeah.
Joel.
Yeah.
We love you.
Yeah. So after college, right at the end of Evergreen State College, my very last program, so I had learned about regenerative agriculture, permaculture, sustainable agriculture, all these different aspects, right? But none of them hit my heartstring and just really plucked it. I was just like, okay, this makes sense. Permaculture, okay, yeah, that's cool. You know, it's diverse, works in almost any climate, you know, except the Arctic. and so I got into this program called Seeds, Beads, Bees, and Other Biodynamical Processes. And I was like, ooh, what's that one? And it was taught by Professor Sarah. She was in my first course that I started. She participated in another program in the Dreams. And so she was like, you should check out this course. So I went there, learned about biodynamics, and I was just like, I started reading Steiner's work, and I was just like, this is the framework that I've been looking for all these years to understand these processes that I'm observing, right? So I'm not just going in and being like, oh, this plant works with this plant because of this, you know, which is useful, but how is the plant growing? What influences the plants to create the patterns that they do?
Yeah.
Right? Because of the seed, it's a portal. What I learned, it's a portal. So just like when the sperm goes inside the egg, it's amazing. Science has been able to film this. There's actually a light that ignites in the egg the moment of conception, and that portal is opened in the space and time of things.
So you're talking about baby right now, or an embryo, or conception.
Conception.
Right. Yeah,
right?
but you're talking that seeds of plants are just as much a portal.
Mother Earth.
Yeah.
Male seed, you know, the seed of the plant, right, comes in, opens the portal, and cosmic information rushes in to fill in the space. Right? There's some genetic material that comes with the seed, right? But the forming of the...
Like this.
Where's my chopsticks? Where's my chopsticks? You know I use chopsticks to get
So just so you guys know, since we're in Brazil, there's this mosquito called pernilongo, and there's some flying around here. So when you guys see us do like this, it's not because we're crazy. It's because there's mosquitoes around us.
So biodynamics, Rudolf Steiner's work, 100 years this year that celebrated.
There. No.
100 years celebrated the agriculture course, right? Because Rudolf Steiner was huge into spiritual development. He wrote one of my favorite books. This is one of them. How to Know Higher Worlds. Incredible. So when I got into biodynamics, I was just like, oh, this is the framework, right? Because it talks about the bodies of the plants, just like the bodies of the human, right? So starting at the mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, animal kingdom, human kingdom, angel kingdom, right? So there's these hierarchies. And what is a plant? A plant is the mineral kingdom animated with an ether body that lives in the sap of the plant.
Yeah, I remember you talking about elevated earth, a tree being elevated earth just now when we were out in on one of the trees, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so you could consider that the earth has its shapes, and then up out of the earth comes the tree, right? And it's just essentially soil elevated.
I wanted to add this image that I have in my head, which is if you look at the sky of one ecosystem and then the earth as another ecosystem, you have the ones that, because plants grow both directions, right? They go up and down at the same time, and they're almost like a pore or a tube of energy that goes downwards and upwards at the same time. So it's a channel through which, now energy can flow on both directions at the same time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, there's an orientation to first the earth and second to the sky,
Yeah.
right? So when the seed sprouts, when the portal opens, it penetrates, and that's the feelers that come out the roots, right? They're like, what environment is here? Is it hostile? What's available? Right? And then once it figures that out, then it's like, okay, I can open up and attempt a life here, right? So, yeah, this is the so within, so without, so below, so above. Getting into agriculture is a spiritual journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it was for me.
Yeah.
I remember being in the university, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always took my designer's manual to university.
Yeah.
And sometimes when the class was boring, I just used the designer's manual so that's the Permaculture Designer's Manual by Bill Mollison, to just distract myself, because I didn't want to know about European Agriculture Pact or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's far out. So you're you fell in love with biodynamics?
Yeah, fell in love with biodynamics.
Yeah.
So much so that I spent 4 years dedicated to researching, practicing, reflecting, researching, and creating a mandala about biodynamics, the cores, which is pretty cool. I can send you an image so you can flash it up for people to like.
Yeah, actually, you offered us one, but that one is about Ayurveda. No. That's the one
It's
about
biodynamics, yeah,
biodynamics.
it's the one
You're
at your
gonna
house.
do the Ayurveda now. Sorry.
Yes.
So yeah, we have one black background and silver, and it is in our living room with the legend right underneath. Yeah.
So yeah, if people are interested and curious, if anybody's watching this, it's conceptualmandalas.com is my website. So
yeah,
check it out.
Yeah, I will put your links on at the end as well.
So yeah, once I got into biodynamics, so this is 2013, right? Very end of 2013. And my older brother, who's a pilot, Jimmy, he, through a friend of his, was like, oh, have you ever heard of Space Weather News? And so he sent me, my brother sends me this link to this guy's, YouTube channel. And he's like, oh, bro, you're studying biodynamics? That's awesome. Maybe check this guy out, right? And so I'm like, okay, this guy named Ben Davidson. The official channel name for many years, which I'm glad, I think it's a good thing he's changing the name from Suspicious Observers on YouTube to Space Weather News. Because Suspicious Observers is kind of like, when he started, was kind of like, oh, look, chemtrails in the skies, sun. Like if you look at his old videos, he's very like, oh, this could be, but he's evolved so much since he started this program. I think it was like 2009, 2011 when he started posting videos about space weather and stuff.
But isn't the name still Suspicious Observer?
It is, it is still now.
Yeah.
But I think it might be changing soon. He just made an announcement. But every day, so 2013, my brother sends me this, and he's just like, hey man, check this guy out, because my brother, he was so motivated to gather resources to prepare for the future, right? He was a pilot, and so he was flying all over the place, training all the time. And so my role, because eventually the goal was for both of us to meet up, and my mission was to gather all this sustainability knowledge, survivability knowledge, growing things under any condition. You go and learn that, and then you come together, and we're gonna create something.
And he was probably more focused on gathering financial resources for that.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he would send me, hey, explore this, see if it's worthy exploring more.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So he sent me, Victor Schauberger, Living Energies. This is one of the best books you could get. Living Energies. So I started getting into space weather news, right? And I was just like, oh, okay, this is pretty trippy. You know, how the sun, the planets are affecting weather systems, earthquakes, monsoons, torrential rains, wind speeds.
Global warming.
Yeah. Well, and it all depends on the data points you use to measure, right? You can actually show with evidence that the planet is getting warmer, but it's nowhere near as warm as it has been in the past.
Yeah.
Right? So we have record heat and record cold in the same year. So that's the swing between the two is becoming more.
So more volatility.
Yeah, in shorter time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So here in Brazil, in the wintertime, 15 degrees from the equator, 900 meters altitude, in the wintertime, dead of winter, it could be 3 degrees here at night. And then it turns into 35 degrees during the day. We're talking 30 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
That's almost like desert.
Yeah, but actually we're in continental climate, right? We're not at the sea. At the sea, usually the temperatures are a lot more regulated and stable because of the proximity of the water. Here we don't have that.
Yeah.
Right, so goes up and down a lot more, right?
Oh, yeah.
And we have been, I remember when we drove up to Alto Paraíso, Chapada dos Veadeiros, which is a beautiful natural park here in Brazil. Probably we still have time to talk a little bit about that later. But we drove for was it 1 hour or 2 hours with soy fields next to us constantly. Just flat land with soy.
Yeah, rolling hills.
Yeah, not even corn. Corn grows a lot higher.
Yeah.
This was all this high.
Yeah.
And probably the soil is not present.
Yeah.
So no soil, just soy.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Soy soil.
Soy soil.
Soy soil.
Good thing about soy is that it's a nitrogen fixer, but probably not in those conditions. And if you have an ecosystem like that, you have a lot more volatility in terms of temperature, humidity. You remember me on the way back, I'm like, it would be so interesting to measure what is the volatility of temperature, what is the volatility of wind and wind direction, what is the volatility of humidity during night, during day, when it rains, when it doesn't, when the sun is out or whatever. Soil erosion, everything becomes so much more extreme when you don't have the plants or the trees or a diversity of plants or a stable ecosystem present, right? That ends up also influencing a lot.
Yeah, of course the temperature is going to go up in those areas. Yeah, so you could say global warming is human caused, and that would be a true statement. Based on the data you use.
Of course, and then obviously we influence very much the microclimates, right? And now what you're saying is that we have the additional change in space weather, basically.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So cycles of the sun, where planet Earth is in its rotation around the Milky Way galaxy, right? So.
So now we have through instruments, right? A lot of funding for space exploration, right? A lot of money going into putting things around the sun, right? And there's a reason for that. To sum it all up in a very succinct manner, the sun, our sun, most likely has a micronova cycle that takes place around every 6,000 years. There's a small burst, and so it's like 5 to 7,000 years, right? And 11 to 13,000 years, these harmonics, right, of a micronova, like a full-blown.
Okay, everybody knows the supernova.
Supernova, dwarf nova, brown nova.
Yeah,
white
most
nova.
people I think only know the supernova.
Yeah, so there are so many different types of novas now that they're using telescopes and things to look way out into space. And even from here, there's one star here that nova is, I think, every 80 years, and it's going to nova this year, right?
So explain to me, well, what is a nova? Is it like a explosive change in conditions of that star, or?
So I'm no space physicist.
Yeah.
But essentially, you could say, as a good metaphor, when the conditions change so that the energy that's generated by a star cannot escape
outwards?
Yeah, so there's no expansion, right? There's a condensing, right? Which could also be influenced by magnetic fields, right? So all of a sudden you're going to develop a hard outer shell, and it's going to turn into a pressure cooker, right? But that energy expanding is just going to keep going and going and going, and all of a sudden it's just like boom.
Yeah.
And now you have plasma and chunks of plasma, and protons and neutrons and electrons, and actual physical matter flowing, nebulas.
Yeah.
So our sun is estimated to be on an 11 to 13,000 year, pretty hardcore micronova schedule, based on lots of data that's come in from all over the world. There was a mission by Charles Hapgood in the late 40s, where he went up to the Arctic, right, to explore layers, right, and explore geology, right, in the Arctic. And he came back and he wrote this book, and it's actually called The Adam and Eve Story, and it was classified for a long time. And it became declassified, I think, in like the 70s, 80s. And essentially, he talked about how fast the Earth can actually turn over, like very fast.
So turnover is
like literally continents slide.
Okay, so we're already talking about some stuff that most people will not understand. So what you're probably talking about is like the detaching of the crust of
From
planet
the mantle.
From the mantle,
Yeah.
And so like it's like the people in the car all of a sudden get projected to the front because you stepped on the brakes.
Yeah,
right?
there's so because we've been able to have experiments in space, right? There's this Russian in the space. It's like a T-handle.
Okay.
Observation.
Yeah, I will try and put one of those videos up.
Okay, yeah. Do a little demonstration. So basically, an object, so the Earth, look, I have an Earth. So the Earth is not symmetrical. Like it's not balanced in the interior to just spin. It has a wobble, right? We have to tilt, right? So that inner part of the Earth, they're called LLSVPs, low layer surface velocity profiles. And so what they do is there's a big one in Africa. I think there's another one that comes up in the Americas, and then another one here. So it's almost like a T handle, right? T shape, which gives us this wobble. So it's not only the moon that influences the tides, but it's this internal influence as well, right? The moon coincides with the tides, but what pulls it back is the internal part of the Earth, right? And so essentially what happens is, and you can see this video, a rotating body has this, and it'll flip, keep rotating, and then come back.
Mm-hmm.
And then flip, rotate, and then come back, right? So the idea is that with enough energy, our planet, and it's not the first time that this happened, but this guy, Charles Hapgood, discovered a lot of things that happens in the Arctic. I mean, they found 7 layers of tropical forests, right, in the Arctic, in the Arctic. So,
So 7 layers is like a layer and then no forest, and then a layer of forest, no
Yeah.
forest, a layer of forest, no forest, a layer of forest, no forest.
tropical.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
With a distance of how many years is there like a...
Well, see, that's another thing that
That's the cycles?
science is changing. You know, they've been using carbon dating for so long since they've been coming up with like, oh, we can carbon date this, right? But the timeline, like they say, the timeline based on, okay, we've measured this mountain, let's say in the Himalayas. It's growing at a rate, it's getting higher, let's say at a rate of 5 centimeters per year. So you do the math and you say, oh, this mountain took this long to get this high. Right? That's the conventional, this is how we measure time and movement. The continents took so long to drift apart, right? When in fact it might be much quicker. There's a Tibetan Plateau glacier that up until 5 or 10 years ago at the most, maybe it was only 5 years ago, they believe that this glacier formed, according to science, 500,000 years ago, 500,000 years. Modern dating methods, 15,000. It's a big difference.
Yeah. So is that, could that be related to, remember Graham Hancock, he talks about Göbekli Tepe or what, but then he also talks about an apparent disaster that happened somewhere in the States where you see this kind of wavy landscape that has rocks that don't belong to there, and these are huge rocks. They're like sizes of houses and whatnot.
Yeah.
That come from like, I don't know how far away.
Hundreds and hundreds of miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you see the wavy pattern that indicates, you know, water has flown here, and, you know, because this water always makes the same pattern in sand or in soil, right?
Yeah. So the
Could that be related to that? Because I think the theory there is that it was an abrupt ice age interruption or something like that, and there was so much ice that melted that there was so much water coming.
The ice dam. They call them ice dams, right?
Okay.
It could be possible.
That was actually one of those.
Yeah, so that these boulders get locked in the ice, and then when the when it breaks because it started warming up, that it was carried this distance, right? I believe also an option for the truth might be that when the rotating body starts slowing down, all that water is going to run from west to east.
So that's the passengers in the car that are projected to the front.
Yeah.
Right? The water just keeps its inertia and just keeps moving.
Yeah. Yeah. So from west to east, the waters take over the land, and
from west to east, waters take over the land.
Yes. So the Atlantic Ocean is going to take over Europe and Africa.
Yeah.
Right. The Pacific Ocean, here in South America, we have the Andes. Right.
Yeah.
Huge help.
Argentina.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the
And
brunt.
Chile.
Peru, Ecuador.
Yeah.
The Andes run through there. And so, so the Pacific Ocean sweeping over this way, but then you have backslosh, right? So once it goes, then
so
it's
like
all
a tsunami, right? First the water goes back.
Huge tsunami.
And then the water goes back. So first the water goes in one direction, and then the thing stops and everything comes back.
Yeah.
Running through in the other direction again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so the idea is that, I mean, it's hard to share everything I've been watching fervently about this topic for the last 12 years, 11, 12 years. But essentially, Earth's magnetic field is weakening, and there's lots of evidence that shows this. The the North Pole and the South Pole, there's something in this floating T handle. It's called a magnetic excursion event, a rotating body, right, that has a field. The pole, because of the rotating field and the influence of other magnetic fields, will relocate, and the rotation of the body will actually shift for a time, but then it goes back. So like if you look at the long history of the Earth, you'll find that roughly where the North and the South Pole, the Arctic and the Antarctic, that's more likely where it's been for most of the time. But there are magnetic reversals and there are magnetic excursion events. So magnetic excursion event is most likely what we're in right now, where the North Pole and the South Pole are actually on a trajectory. They're speeding up, right? And where they meet is most likely going to be in the eastern part of the Indian Ocean, where, you know, flights have gone disappeared. And
Yeah, but like, I kind of have an idea about physics, right? A good idea.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of opposites, south and north. Supposedly, North and South Pole in terms of magnetic field. It's almost like a flux of magnetism.
Yeah.
Right? But what sense does it make? Now, we have these balls here, for example.
Yeah.
Right? These are magnetites, right? And they align themselves with north and south. I think if I take a pair of these, I cannot put this part.
You can flip it
Here, they
get resistance.
They don't want to touch each other. It just goes around. But then if I let go, this one just turn around.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they actually
should remain opposite of each other.
They should remain opposite of each other, but they actually attract each other from here, right? Like north attracts south.
Yes.
But what kind of system?
Sense?
What sense does that make, right?
So now enter in the South Atlantic anomaly.
Oh, look at that.
The SAA.
You see this?
Oh, no.
You cannot see it on the camera, no.
So the South Atlantic anomaly. In the year 2000, we're going to give you a picture here. In the South Atlantic.
Very digital.
Roughly here. I'm an analog guy in a digital world. All right, so South Atlantic, right here. In the year 2000, ships that were crossing the South Atlantic started noticing, whoa, my compass is off. It's going nuts when I go through this area.
A little bit like Jack Sparrow's compass that, just goes around like this.
Yeah. So they started monitoring this area, and this big, giant south magnetically charged hole is opening up here. Meanwhile, the South Pole has left the Antarctic and is moving towards Australia, right? So we have the South Pole moving towards Siberia, Mongolia, so they're on a trajectory like this.
So North Pole moving that way, you mean?
Yeah, green. Oh, yeah, so it's moving this way. And
so down to Russia, direction India?
This is where they're most likely going to meet. Like
where is that?
Malaysia. Right.
Is that, are Malaysians going to be happy about that?
Well, that's the thing. It's guesswork, right? We can only measure the changes that are happening now. So anyways, back to the South Pole, right? Right over here is another South Pole that's opening.
So you have two South Poles.
Two South Poles. If you look at the energy signature here, there's a brilliant model that happened with the sun, right? Since they put so many instruments around the sun, and you can see the magnetic field lines because the sun is actually in the process. It hasn't completed yet. It's a roughly 10.9 year cycle where the north and south poles flip on the sun, right? So that's like you have sunspot maximum, sunspot minimum. Right now we're actually in maximum solar activity, which actually puts a blanket of protection around our solar system from magnetic influences like X-rays, cosmic rays. Right?
So kind of our magnetic field of the Earth is a protection, and then the sun protects us, the whole solar system with a magnetic field as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's like, remember us talking about how everything just spins around other parts, and like atoms do that in atoms, and then molecules as well. But then you see exactly the same reflection in the cosmos completely.
Oh yeah.
You know, we were talking about Pluto actually, that Pluto has some moons that spin around Pluto.
Yeah, I think
Pluto
it has 2 moons.
spins around the sun, and so on and so forth, and then all of that spins around the central sun of the Milky Way.
Yeah, and the sun is carrying us like this.
Yeah,
Do
exactly.
you know the direction we're headed?
The direction we're headed, in what sense?
Like, where is the sun taking us? Towards which constellation?
We were in Aquarius, or what was it?
No, we're heading in the direction of Sagittarius.
Okay.
Pluto is so far out there. It's in Sagittarius right now. It spends, I think, 20 years or something in one constellation. And so they've been able to measure, I think it was last year, they measured a third of Pluto's atmosphere, which, you know, all these bodies have just a slight amount of atmosphere. A third of Pluto's atmosphere disappeared. So they're like, what's going on? So coming back to these changes of magnetism flipping, when I talk about the sun having a micronova cycle between 11 and 13,000 years based on what we can measure here with magnetic fields and the rocks and everything, the distance between the waves. So imagine you throw a rock right into the middle of a very cool, calm pond. Right, you're going to get these waves, right? That
like
travel
concentric.
So imagine that on a galactic scale of an explosion that happened many moons ago. And the distance between those waves is roughly 11 to 13,000 years.
Okay,
So,
but what exploded exactly?
I mean, we can make all sorts of assumptions. Maybe God farted. He probably had oxalates. So, no offense, God. That was just, you know me.
Yeah, don't take oxygen.
So,
Don't eat your spinach.
yeah. So there's planets that are showing extreme environmental changes on their planets, more wind speed, earthquakes. I mean, there's a reason why they're not just curious about the planets. They want to use planets as a means to understanding when the sun's going to go off, because after
who is they?
I would say there's high levels of government or private families that have knowledge. I would say the Vatican definitely has superior amounts of knowledge about the sun and how it can rewrite all of humanity like that. There's a reason why one of the first telescopes that they developed is called Lucifer, and it was built to look at the sun.
Damn, boy.
Yeah, so
That's a conspiracy.
Yeah,
We have our tinfoil hat on.
Yeah, I
You
just
guys-
have bamboo. It's better than tinfoil.
No, that's actually Portuguese cork.
It is.
Did
Did I say bamboo?
Say again?
Oh, the other one I have is bamboo. I burned it years ago. See, anthrax. Yeah, so there's a lot of changes happening to the other planets. Venus, Mars, all the planets that since we've been able to monitor their situations, like Neptune storms, Jupiter storms, they're starting to move backwards. Like ever since we've been able to observe, like, oh, there's every few years there's a storm that comes down in Neptune, and for the first time since we've been observing these storms moving from the polar regions to the equator, for the first time one of those storms is coming, stops, and it's starting to go back. So there's this huge reversal happening on a galactic plane. Pluto's the furthest one out there. And there's a reason why they want to have access to these changes on the sun, on the planets, because post World War II, after the explorations of Charles Hapgood and all that, what came next? The Cold War with Russia. So you have an excuse for all sorts of funding for creating underground bases. Trillions of dollars in the U.S. economy goes into creating underground bases, not for nuclear threat. I believe it's for solar threat.
Okay, so explain to me what would a solar threat look like?
Micronova. So imagine.
So is that a big ass CME, coronal mass ejection?
Yes.
So we have already been going through a few coronal mass ejections, right?
Yeah.
But they have not hit us really hardcore.
Some have.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that people would see when one of these happens? For example, in the northern lights, in places where you normally don't have northern lights, right?
Yeah, that's another good point. In the last several years, we've actually had records of not only close to the equator auroras, but sightings at lower latitudes with less than super powerful CMEs.
Yeah.
So Earth's magnetic field weakening, those colors, it's permeating closer and closer to the Earth's inner core.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what other things? Like we've been having a lot more earthquakes, can it be?
Yeah, earthquakes. So
volcanoes, earthquakes.
The great thing about technology is that we're actually able to measure what astrology, when they say the planets are aligned or these things are, right? So there's this thing that we've been able to measure. They're called IMFs, not the International Monetary Fund, the interplanetary magnetic fields. And what they are two-way currents.
So these are the kind of galactic umbilical cords. Yeah.
All connected to the sun.
So explain a little bit more about that. So it's a direct exchange.
Yeah, so it's like a two-way current, right? Sometimes there's more energy coming to the Earth than going back to the sun. Sometimes there's more going back to the sun than coming to Earth, right? Depending on the charge. And there's also positive, negative. There's 4 quadrants to the sun. I don't know if you know this, but there's something called the solar wind, which rides on the holes, right? There's these dark spot holes. Like we just had a huge one traverse the sun. It extended from the southern part of the sun to the northern part, right? This is a sign that the magnetic fields are flipping. The bigger the holes get. Like, whoa. So these streams, coronal hole streams, right? They're positive, negative, right? And they're spinning out. There's something called an Enlil spiral that on NASA's homepage that you can actually look, and you can see these spirals coming out. So depending on the timing of if there's an explosion, when there's an explosion, which I mean so you have solar flares, right, CMEs. So you have positive, negative charged sunspots. The more integrated these sunspots get, the mixing of positive within negative, the high flaring potential exists. If they're separated, like positive, negative floating by, flaring potential is low. So there's a lot of interest in looking at the incoming sunspots. We have two satellites that actually measure the sun. We don't have one on the other side, but we have one on the Earth-facing side at all times.
Yeah. Which makes sense. I mean,
yeah,
if the fart goes backwards, that's fine. But because what matters is us getting the solar wind.
But when a CME, a large CME ejects on the other side of the sun, if the coupling with the Earth because of the solar wind is connected, right? If positive, we're connected, coupled, that proton stream is still gonna right all the way to the Earth and affect the electrical systems.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when you have like radio interference.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have transponders that explode.
Or you really have almost like an EMP effect, right?
Yeah. In
Like-
1859 was the last solar flare that actually shocked the people who were working on the telegraph systems,
Mhm.
right, and knocked out power grids of people using melted wires.
Yeah.
Right, that's 1859. If we were to get hit by the same level with Earth's magnetic field weakening
With
and something like that,
these guys and this guy, the computer, everything would be off.
yes, absolutely. So a micronova, imagine that. So a micronova will essentially go through the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was impact-facing side event, right? So depending on the energy level, you're not going to get on one side of the Earth. Maybe a lot of systems survive.
So there's an aspect of Russian roulette to it. So
Yeah,
it might happen, but we might not be hit full on.
yeah,
Right. Straight up in the face, right? It
exactly.
might come like whew,
But if it's
pass by us.
micronova, that's everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one
no getting
is-
away from that one
Okay.
because it's all directions.
Yeah.
And we're talking about chunks of plasma, which I also believe forms
So we-
elements on the planets.
So we could actually have like physical impacts of pieces of sun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Molten sun flying in the skies.
Damn.
Yeah.
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 Okay,
It's
so
possible.
this is really like disaster kind of looking scenario. So and these things would all happen at the same time, like magnetic influence. Like will the micronova when it happens also influence the magnetic field and flipping and that change of direction and
Yeah, that's when
and
we're-
the Earth's rotation
Mm-hmm.
with us being hit by pieces, chunks of
Sounds
sun.
so much fun, huh? I mean, just like, what do you do?
Okay, so what will come first?
What will come first?
Yeah.
That's
So
a really
sunlight
good guess.
takes what, 8 minutes? What
Yeah.
was it? 8 minutes from the sun to Earth?
roughly.
Right. Speed of light.
Yeah.
Like, so what happens first if something like that happens?
So that's why I like some of the ancient texts, you know, like the Bible. It has some really good stories about events that actually happened. Like the sun went dark, the sun stood still, right?
Yeah.
So here in the African region, in this area, right, we have the story of the sun stood still in the sky, right? And then in the Americas, what do we have? The sun didn't come up.
Yeah, because she stood still on the other side.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
we have sun ceremonies that were created in some cultures, and the other ones they were like the sun stood still in the sky and the earth was scorched. You know, so you got to put the pieces together, and of course those narratives have been changed. But when the sun doesn't come up, I mean that's a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you dance until the sun comes up.
Okay, so what comes first?
I would say that the sun, the darkening of the sun, right?
Is the first thing you see.
Yeah.
So
And
the
slow
light
down-
is the first one arriving, right?
Yes.
Everything else comes after. The chunks come a lot later.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the pulse of energy will be here before any plasma. Yeah.
And magnetism would probably be instant.
Pretty close. Yeah. The
Because
electrons
magnetism, I
are
mean,
moving
like, it's not like
the
magnetism
speed
is,
of light.
is flying,
Yeah.
right?
Well, those interplanetary magnetic fields, right? Those electrons are traveling on these rivers, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, you can predict opportunities for increased earthquakes based on planetary geometry. Right? That's a known now in a lot of the science fields. They're like, oh wow, this is actually a real thing. Yeah.
Okay, so now this is one side of the coin that I think is most people are not aware of, and probably many of these things that you're talking about right now that kind of go into or deal with climate change, which for many people right now that are a little bit revolted about what governments are doing with our freedom and so on and so forth, and the guilt trip of like, oh, it's because of your behavior that, the planet is, the temperature is rising and the sea level is rising. Although I have never seen any sea level rise anywhere. I mean, you can have a speech in the water and say it's because of the rising sea levels, but probably.
Or maybe it's the changing levels of islands.
Yeah.
Like maybe some islands are sinking.
Yeah. Okay, so because for example in Portugal, we have this place called Belém in Lisbon, and you see very old pictures from it, and the level of the sea is actually slightly higher than it is now at that place, right? You see that castle in Belém. That is exactly in the same place, and the water level is not necessarily higher, actually, probably lower. So, well, that's one thing. But now, the whole conspiracy behind it, right? Like many people now think, so you mentioned chemtrails before, that is a thing, that
It's
they're
for
trying
real,
to,
yeah.
so that is really happening, that we're being, that the sky is chemically being sprayed uh, with the intention of either blocking out sunlight, which is kind of essential for health or for life. That's why I used to be a god. The changing of weather patterns, right? The cloud seeding for making it rain, or I don't know if there's a way of not making it rain. It could be. And then you have these radars, the NextRad, the HARP, and so on and so forth. And all of these kind of playing together to influence, I don't know, temperatures, rain, precipitation, probably condensation, storms,
Yeah.
wind directions, tornadoes, and hurricanes. Like I heard that there's a big conspiracy around Helena and how these NextRad radars that are scattered all over the U.S. and how they, I saw some pictures where they're like active. Maybe I will try and get some of that footage and put it on here, where you see these radars kind of active, and you see the tornado always going around those radars that are active, and really being guided into like Florida. And I think Helena was already the second one that hit Florida in a really short amount of time, right? Like they were still cleaning up the brush from the previous hurricane, and they were already having the second one, right?
Well, yeah, in that case, I definitely believe that there's the technology that exists to affect the barometric pressure in certain cells and areas in high and low systems.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I like to use earth.nullschool.net as a reference for looking at multiple layers, live layers, past layers, for understanding what the pressure systems were at certain altitudes, particulates in the atmosphere, chemicals, all that kind of stuff. And a while ago, I started getting into planetary geometry forecasting for influencing existing systems of weather. And I need to get back into it, but Dennis Klochek wrote two amazing books. One is called Climate, Soul of the Earth, really good one. And then the other one is, I think the first one he made is Weather and the Cosmos. And so he talks about planetary geometry and the moon's aspects and everything, and how it affects weather systems, right? So I would actually look at, to investigate this, if it was a man-induced thing, it would mean to me that if there's no help with the planets, or there's nothing going on with the null school maps, I would be like, okay, yeah, there's a high probability that this is a human-caused event, right? Because the planets will show in certain aspects. That's why I have this Earth here with
That
the
is divided.
constellations. Yeah, because 40 years of Dennis's observations, he found that Aries is over Western Europe, Taurus over Eastern Europe, Africa, right, and so on and so forth. So in this area, central U.S., you have Capricorn, and then East Coast is Aquarius. So based on these moving systems, you might have a planet that's like, for example, let's say Mercury is in retrograde around Aquarius, and there's typically Capricorn, right, is like January, February, the sun's there. But then you have these planetary influences. So if you have a weather pattern moving from east to west, right, and then you have a retrograde planet and it's either here or opposite, it can actually affect that weather system to either amplify it or make it slow down and dissipate.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely possible. Chemtrails are a
Yeah,
real thing.
Can you talk about that? So I showed you. You remember me showing you some pictures, like because in Sintra lately, where we live, I've been seeing just the sky full of lines all going the same direction, and I sometimes think, okay, so the wind is probably going in one direction. You have airplanes passing. And then the line just moves to the side. The next airplane passes on exactly the same place, and the line continues to move with the wind.
Yeah.
But then I started seeing diagonal lines to those, and they were like boom, 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 all parallel to each other, almost all in the same distance. And then I started seeing like airplanes moving diagonally, and I would have diagonal lines as well. So, but you gave me a different theory for it.
Yeah.
Right.
So my thoughts is that not all what could be seen as like a thin trail behind a plane turning into and spreading and coming down. I don't believe that all of these are chemtrails.
Yeah, but if you start seeing it spread out, like we would have clear sky, like, well, to this morning.
Yeah,
right?
This morning, super clear sky.
Super clear sky, and then I started seeing lines.
Yeah.
And then some other days where we have super clear sky, especially on a weekend.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
Nothing.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, what's going on? Is it because it's a weekend?
And then the other day,
You're not working today?
It was a clear sky, and we actually saw a couple lines. Right, that were definitely from a plane passing over.
Yeah,
right?
But then what would usually happen is these lines, they start thin out, form, and then just become a mantle.
Yeah.
And just at one point, the whole sky is just gray.
Becomes gray.
And this whole summer, it's been like that.
Yeah.
Like the whole summer in Portugal. That's why I'm so happy to be in Brazil, and a little bit sad of leaving already. Is that we kind of made up with the tan.
Yeah.
For the summer that was like absent. We didn't really have a summer. I think we can count on our hands the times that we went to beach, and we live 5 minutes from the beach, and we didn't have at all the same summer that we had before.
Yeah.
So you were talking about particles, so there can be something in the sky that...
Yeah, I mean, there have been more particles ejected into the jet stream level, burning coal, right? Volcanic events, underwater eruptions. There was this one volcano that erupted underwater, and it spewed into the atmosphere, the water vapor. I think it increased the water vapor in the atmosphere by 1/3.
Okay, and water vapor, by the way, is a greenhouse gas.
Yeah.
Shh, don't tell anybody.
Don't tell
They will
anybody.
illegalize water.
Yeah, they're gonna kill the volcanoes. And be like, we need to bomb the volcanoes. Anyway, so yeah, that's again on days like this, use the Earth.null school site to look at the particulates.
I will
in
reference
the
that.
atmosphere.
Yeah.
Because when the planes fly through at certain altitudes, it is like butt-ass cold. If you're up there and you're like, wow, it's negative 40 degrees, right? And you're flying, which is another trippy thing, you know, the troposphere, stratosphere, ionosphere. It actually gets cold, and then it gets hot, and then it gets cold again, and then it gets hot, right? So we have these layers of hot and cold before we even get to space, which is supposed to be really cold, right?
Yeah.
So as planes fly through these rivers in the jet stream level, right? These particulates are trapped up there, but we can't really see them because they're dispersed so well. It might be, gray sky, it looks a bit, but when a plane passes through and the airfoil effect of the
wings,
the wind passing over the wings and that condensation, it's called a contrail, right? That's the one thing that...
So a condensation trail.
Yeah, condensation trail. So up there at that altitude, you have these particulates that are like free floating around, and then all of a sudden, you got this giant wing that comes through and just like whack, locks it together with ice. It's so cold, and so then my thoughts is that it creates this cloud. It's so cold that it can't melt. So what does it do? It gets heavy, and it sticks together, and it rides the wind and slowly sinks down. Now there are chemtrails, absolutely, for sure. There are programs, weather modification programs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it started during the Vietnam War, wasn't it? Operation Popeye, where they extended the monsoon in that region so that roads would still be underwater and everything would be muddy. So like all transport of resources in that region would be compromised to a certain extent. Yeah. But obviously, what is funny is actually American soldiers were in there and they would have to get along with the whole thing as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, thank you very much.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Well, it's not the first time the government's like, oh yeah, tools.
Yeah. Yeah. So cannon fodder.
Where are we at with time? What do we do?
It's 6
Almost
o'clock.
2 hours.
Yeah.
Hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah, you said, it's going to be an hour.
Hour and a half.
Yeah. So you talked about the magnetic excursion. Yeah. So now what is a little bit of the antidote to all of these things that we have mentioned right now?
Well, I mean, if you look at history, humans have survived this event. They had to have. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. But if you look all over the world, a lot of the places that housed hundreds and thousands of people are caves, right? It wasn't because they couldn't build anything. They didn't know how to build anything. We're like, we'll just dig a hole. No, it was because they needed to survive. Like, all over the Middle East, there's caves. All over the Americas, there's caves. The modern explorers did their best to we got to cover up these caves, right, as best as possible. So, in my opinion, I believe having some kind of fallout shelter is going to be a benefit for people who at least want to try to see if they can survive this shift. Because the probability of this shift occurring based on the acceleration of the magnetic field lines. Oh, this is another important thing that I forgot to mention. 2014, I think it was, every 2 years, the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, they release maps, right, around the world for special teams.
Yeah.
So I believe it was in 2014, the special forces, because they use a lot of map and compass, right? Digital footprint. They don't want to be detected. So if they need navigation, if they don't have it in their head, they need a map.
So you get caught when you have a GPS system or something like that.
It's
right?
detectable.
Yeah. So if I use my GPS on my phone,
there's technologies to
to find me.
Yeah.
And they
depending
don't want
on
to
the
be
country
found.
and where you're at. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Russia for sure has those technologies. Iran most likely too.
Probably most of the countries that have nuclear capability will have those technologies.
Yeah. So 2014, I believe it was this year, 2014. It's been 10 years since this happened at least. Special teams went to the DIA and they were like, hey, these magnetic, so there's MAGVAR, right? Magnetic variation. that shows the difference between magnetic north and true north. And for navigating on maps, you have to know the difference between the two, right, for different parts of the world. So the magnetic lines have been changing so much so quickly. Before 2014, they would produce maps that would be good for 2 years, right? Now they're at the point where they're like, we need maps every year because the magnetic field lines are changing so much. So the animals follow magnetic field lines, right? They're oh God, the
So
animals are going.
Birds that what do you call it again? When the birds fly somewhere else.
Yeah, when they migrate, right?
When birds migrate, yeah.
They have magnetoreceptors in their beaks, and insects, right? So the birds, what do? They carry seeds, right, in their digestive system. They are going to where the earth is telling them to go because of survival, right? They follow the field lines. There's a reason why life follows magnetism. And so as the lines change, they're going to be directed, right? Because they're bringing the seeds for those new places, right? So yeah, there's a lot of indicators showing that this magnetic shift on our planet is happening faster and faster. If you're curious, look at the South Atlantic anomaly. Look at the videos of the last 25 years of an animation and be like, you will actually find that hole has expanded and opened into 2 holes, and we're actually right in the middle of it's the second hole that opened is containing all of South America, basically all the way down to like Uruguay. So yeah, surviving this shift, I think underground is going to be the best way to go. But I mean, you really just gotta hope you're in the right place at the right time, but not live in fear of like, oh God, I gotta escape and go to the mountains, and be like, no, you live your life. If you're supposed to survive this thing and be here, you will. Nobody's getting off this planet alive.
True. Yeah.
So just deal with it.
Yeah. So you got to be alive to die.
Yeah, everything that came here came to experience birth and experience death.
Yeah.
Even the animals.
Yeah. So what are you doing here right now? So you moved to Brazil.
Yeah. So actually, it was about 5 or 6 years ago before I even met my current wife. I was looking, with my brother, he was like, hey, where in South America, go to the continents, look at like different places that you think might be survivable zones. And
But did your brother already knew about this kind of information?
Yeah, he would watch some of the videos here and there.
Suspicious observers.
Yeah, suspicious observers.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. And so I zoomed in central Brazil, because when we're talking about like sloshback from waves, you want to be not on the coast, right? And so I came to this area and I zoomed all the way in, and I see this terrain. I use terrain maps, right, on Google Earth, and I'm like, oh wow, look at this. It's like right here in the middle of the country, literally the middle, is just an elevated area. It's 1,500 meters altitude. With lots of obstacles surrounding the area further away for any potential wave to be dissipated and the energy of it to be like calmed before even reaching these higher mountains. Right? So
we're here where we are right now in Planalchina. We're around 900?
Yeah, we're about 900
height.
Yeah.
Right, but this place you're talking about is like 1,500, right?
Yeah, minimum. There's some of the peaks that are like 1,900 in the area. So you'll find these little islands of peaks of mountains. A lot of sandstone, limestone.
So, and this is where we actually went, right? Like in Chapada dos Veadeiros and Alto Paraíso and so on.
So I told my brother, I was like, this would be a place I would go. And I'm like, as I was zooming in, I was like, why is there a city here called New Rome? I was like, that's weird. You know? There's a New Rome in South Brazil, and there's a New Rome here, and they're both in the mountains. I think it was interesting that there's some Catholic priest many years ago, late 1800s. I forget his name. Viviani knows his name. But he talked about the center of Brazil being one of the places that would survive the next disaster of the earth.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. And I found out about this after.
And so in 2012, was it? Actually, lots of people moved and flocked to exactly that region, right? But it's more specifically to Alto Paraíso, right? Or
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
I don't know honestly too much about like the reason. Oh, I mean, ET's coming
to save us.
Coming to save us. Everybody's like, oh, there's lots of
2012
crystals.
because it's the end of the Mayan calendar, right?
Yeah, the end of protection. The Earth is no longer in quarantine.
Okay, quarantine of
influence from extraterrestrials.
Okay.
I've heard that too. Like
Yeah.
we've been under quarantine for too long, or up until this point, and now there could be influences. But there's a lot of theories going on out there. I just roll with what works for me. It's like flat Earth. I feel sorry for a lot of flat earthers.
Doesn't feel flat. I mean, if you like what we were saying before, right? Like if you look at atoms, they are circular and they move in a circular fashion. Obviously, I don't know exactly what the shape of an electron is, but all of them are
droplets of water
working in orbits and everything, right? Why would the rest would not be round?
Yeah, that's right? Okay.
It would be a very, very big conspiracy, though.
Yeah, I mean,
I think they could. If there was a big conspiracy about it, I think planet Earth could just be a lot bigger than we actually think it is. Probably into the North Pole and the South Pole and into those regions, but besides that, I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that they can actually change the magnetism if that's the case.
Yeah,
I mean that's pretty
true.
Yeah,
true.
That's pretty spectacular. And make plants grow just with a light bulb.
Yeah, and you're also, so I was asking about the antidote. You're also gonna move into using animals here, first here on this farm, and then also in when you might eventually move and find a piece of land in that other region around New Rome.
Yeah, we're hoping the next 5 years we'll have the resources where we can actually get a place up there. We'll find the right place with water flowing through. Literally in this zone, the water comes up out of the ground, which is another topic of primary water. The earth producing water within itself. Not that it's a limited resource, but it's actually being produced as a fission process inside the earth.
As a what process?
Fission. Yeah.
Can you explain what that means?
Hydrogen, oxygen.
Fusion.
Fusion, sorry.
Okay, fusion.
Yeah. Fusion process.
Like hydrogen and helium in the sun, but fusion process
inside the earth.
Okay, so basically brown gas coming together to form water. Brown gas is two molecules of like two parts of hydrogen to one part of oxygen.
Yeah.
Right. In terms of molecules. Right. Yeah.
So flip that around.
Yeah.
So here is actually under or above one of the places where water is being produced and the earth is just coming out. Right.
So you were also one of the first guys that gave me the idea that maybe petroleum is not a fossil fuel and maybe it's not a finite resource. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's some ideas. I mean, from some of the limited research I've done, like this idea that there's pockets of oil that are just covered up with plant and animal material for hundreds and thousands and millions of years, right? And turned into this oil. I know the chain is much more complex than water. Water is more simplistic.
Yeah.
Simple. But yeah. But if the earth can produce water, why could it not produce petroleum or oils?
Yeah. Only later, I think this was about a year ago or so, I saw this podcast with Tucker Carlson, and this Chinese guy that is a climatologist, and he said that there are planets in our solar system. I'm not sure if it was Venus, or I think there was a moon of Jupiter or something, or Saturn, that have they have measured. This is through spectrography, that they have like the similar thing to petroleum present on their planet, and there's like no organic matter. There's
Now.
no
Yeah.
right, but I mean, like most of these planets look very inhabitable, probably for a very long time, and that they don't have, you know, the conditions to form what we call fossil fuel, right? There was never, from my understanding, there was never really a proof that what we call fossil fuel is actually originated from fossils,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, it's like the guy Charles Hapgood. He, after going and doing this report about the Adam and Eve story, then got put in charge of the educational board for geology, for saying and saying, this is how long it takes the Earth to change. This is, the whole teaching of geology is based on a sham, of
Yeah.
like misdirection.
Yeah.
But the idea that the Earth produces petroleum. I mean, my question is like, since petroleum was found in so many oil wells in different parts of the world, how many wells have gone dry? Is it because they're taking out faster than it can be produced? Or did they just go dry because it's not being produced?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look at that question too.
Yeah. So now, just as a last thing that I wanted to know your thoughts on it, we just had the Trump inauguration. One of the last things that I heard from him was that they're going to drill for oil in the States, and that they have probably the biggest reserves, apparently, of oil and gas in the States. What are your thoughts on Trump being president now?
Well, let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens.
I've never met him, so I
Yeah.
can't say if he's a good guy or not a good guy.
Yeah.
But I know that to get in a position of power like that is allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever gets in there, no matter what they say and what they do, they're allowed to come in.
Mm-hmm.
They're not chosen.
Yeah.
They're not chosen by the people who vote. Let's just say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're still
Skeptical.
You're still skeptical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see if he. I mean, you just got to look at the percentage of what they say they're going to do and what actually happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like RFK with the health
Make America.
and Human Services.
Yeah.
Right?
Make America health again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see. It looks like he's already called out several things, but we'll see what happens. They've taken red food coloring, like that's a good step.
Yeah.
in the right
It's
direction.
only one tiny thing, really.
And fluoride from the water.
They did?
Their RFK is addressing like, there's actually evidence showing that children that drink fluoride in their water have lower IQs.
Mm-hmm.
So they're looking at removing fluoride from the drinking water supplies, which is duh. But they don't want smart, critically thinking people. No governments want that.
Yeah. Well, they talk about. I've listened to Vivek Ramaswamy. I've listened to Trump. I've listened to J.D. Vance. I've listened to Elon Musk. Who else? And all these people that are around there. Tucker Carlson. Maybe Joe Rogan.
I like Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, I like him too.
Yeah.
And they all they seem to have a good moral compass, right? And they talk about things that actually feel really good, freedom of speech, your ability to defend yourself, economic, really good economy, driven by driven people, by good people, intelligent people, and meritocracy.
Yeah.
Like
No, yeah.
right now, for me, it kind of feels good.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? That's the perfect time to put somebody into power that is going to be changing these things and giving support to these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden there's something that comes in that just like nobody saw coming.
Mm-hmm.
There's the potential for that too.
Yeah.
It's like here in Brazil, they had this thing called Pix that was developed by the government. They're like, oh, it'll be a great, easy way for people to make transfers and pay people. You could pay somebody on the street, like, oh, I don't have any money, but can you
Pix me?
Pix me, right?
Yeah.
It goes right into their account. You're like, oh yeah, here, just with the number. And now that so many people are using it, they're like, oh, now we're going to start monitoring this better, and if you use more than this amount per month, then you're going to be scrutinized and you're going to have to pay for it. So
it's programmable, probably,
yeah.
right? So this would be kind of an entry drug for a CBDC, a centralized bank digital currency.
Yeah, exactly. So the savior comes in, and then all of a sudden, just like with one single action, everybody's so supporting, and then like all of a sudden, so there is the potential for that. That's what I mean by like I'm always critical of whoever comes to any office of power.
Yeah. And right now what I see, like, I like to listen to Elon Musk, but he's very powerful, and he's creating a Starlink system, a satellite system, where everybody has internet and everything kind of goes through him.
Dude. One of my favorite documentaries I've ever seen. You might have seen it. It's called Terminator.
Yeah.
It's a great
seen all of them.
Great documentary.
I've seen all of them. Yeah. Skynet.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And also Idiocracy. Right. That's a really good one.
That's the best documentary ever. I think we're actually approaching that.
Yeah. It feels a little bit like that. I remember the other day at the butcher, I'm like, hey, don't take any fat off, please. And he's like, and he's like, what are you doing? You're cutting the fat off. Don't cut it off.
He's like, but this is fat.
This is Cebu, and I'm like, Cebu is fat.
He's like, well, yeah. And you're like, yeah, I want the fat. And you're like, okay, but I'm only just taking off some of the fat. But I'm taking off
Yeah, any last thing that you want to say, or anything you want to add to this? I will try and make book references.
Yeah, I can send you some references.
I think this might be probably a really good book.
Yeah, Thinking in Systems by Danilo.
Want to read at one point?
Danilo Melrose, yeah. And flow forms. I know we didn't get into talking about water, but flow form.
Yeah, I think we got to repeat this, man.
Another 2 hours?
Yeah, 2.5. I mean,
no, we could do a video too as well, if people are interested. Yeah. Or just for archiving sakes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, flow forms. I'm going to be doing some flow forms here on the land.
So he's going to start his channel or Instagram or whatever.
Yeah, eventually I'll get to the social media stuff.
You heard this guy. He talked to Unscourge and he told him, look, man, you got a lot of information that you want to bring out into the world.
Yeah.
And here, back to you.
I feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's time. I think I need to be cleaned up a little bit. I need to talk to my barber.
Yeah. We're gonna trim him up. Yeah. And give him a haircut.
Thanks for the opportunity to share, some of my stories and experiences and my learnings.
And you're a great storyteller, actually.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, like every time you tell a story, I'm like, I could listen to this all the time. The other day at the fire, you told that story about your lucid dream in which you meditated, and I'm like, what? And you learned this in a university?
Yeah. Yeah. Good times, man. No, I'm grateful for your visit here. you energize my soul for doing things, and you bring so much information.
And we have the little...
And we have the little munchkin knocking and be like, Daddy, I want to be thrown around. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, man. Woohoo!
Love you, bro.
Love you too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening in. My wife is just coming in. And yeah, you can talk. I mean, we're using the microphones. So yeah, thank you for listening in. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. And I am looking forward to having another conversation with you. And the next guest, probably you, to talk about dance and feminine energy and personal development. And so like and subscribe and all these things. And I see you soon. Much love. Take care. This was the Holistic Smalltalk Podcast. Enjoy. With Carson and Joel.